First Maccabees discusses the emergence of the Hasmonean dynasty and its exploits up until about the time of John Hyrcanus. And in terms of what makes First Maccabees unique is that it presents itself as something of a unprovoked struggle against the Greek Seleucid Empire, facilitated and abetted by collaborationist modernist party Jews. At least that's how the narrative presents itself. Now, many historians question this version of events, but as far as we know from later literature, it definitely seems to have been accepted as something of a cultural text that's operative behind much of what you see in the New Testament. In terms of what makes it unique, in terms of the other Maccabean books, is Third Maccabees. It deals with Egyptian diaspora Jews. None of this political stuff going on in Palestine in the 2nd century. Fourth Maccabees deals with something of a martyrdom tradition and discussing the nobility of reason over the emotions and how Judaism serves as the exemplar of that. Second Maccabees is a very Hellenic style, almost something of a tragedy in terms of the way that it narrates the political and military discourse, which is also covered in First Maccabees. First Maccabees, however, is much more one-sided. The bad guys are much more evil, the righteous are much more righteous, and it presents itself as legitimating the rule of the Hasmonean group of people when they gained control of the temple and the city of Jerusalem and achieved first local autonomy within the empire, but then also full outright independence as well.
Yes, there are many challenges in studying an ancient text, right? One of the significant challenges of studying First Maccabees as a part of the Septuagint is the absence of its Hebrew pholaga, we believe. First Maccabees is widely believed as a Greek translation of a Hebrew composition. But unlike most other Septuagint books, no Hebrew manuscript is remaining to us. Dr. Numada and myself are working on First Maccabees for SBL commentary of Septuagint series. And because of this very reason, quote unquote, the absence of the remaining Hebrew manuscript, our methodology and approaches to the text are quite different in many ways from other contributors of the same series. And this would be one of the most challenging problems, I guess. But at the same time, one of the significant insight of this book is that the Septuagint First Maccabees still reflect some linguistic characteristics of Hebrew historical narrative writings. Examples are the introductory formula of a new section of narrative such as Kai Egeneto, which reflects Hebrew Vayehi construction, or typical endings of the biblical historiography in the end of chapter 9 and chapter 16. Also, the extensive use of conjunction Kai, which reflects Hebrew Vav consecutive construction, whereas the significantly less frequent use of conjunction De instead, as it is typical to other Septuagint historical books such as Samuel's, Kings, and Chronicles. And these linguistic characteristics possibly tell us that the author, or at least the translator, might have thought that he was writing more or less an official historiography of the Maccabean revolt in the 2nd century BCE by following the Hebrew historical narrative registrations.
From a Christian point of view, and probably from a narratological point of view, First Maccabees chapter 2 is a very important passage in this book. And it's the passage that we'll be looking at during this course. The reason that chapter 2 is important is because it outlines many of the ideological underpinnings of the Hasmonean program, at least as outlined in this book. And this ideology explains a lot of the behavior and the priorities that you see in the narrative of First Maccabees. Chapter 2, it includes something of a farewell discourse, very similar to what you would find with an Old Testament patriarch. And it functions ideologically. It tells us, who plays what role, why they should do certain things, stay faithful to the law and the covenant, and the Lord will empower you, be with you, that kind of thing. And the influence of some of these ideologies, you even see show up here and there in the New Testament. Don has a book on the book of Hebrews, and you see this in some of its treatment of the priesthood and the covenant in the book of Hebrews. I have an article on the Gospel of John, and you see something of this, religious struggle, this zeal theme in certain parts of the book of John as well. It also shows up in places like Acts chapter 13 and 14. Some of these motivations might even be, behind what's going on with the book of Galatians as well. All of that is speaking from the Christian point of view. And you'll notice that a lot of what we're talking about speaks to sort of the influence of First Maccabees and its events on the New Testament. Speaking from a more Jewish point of view, however, a Jew would probably view First Maccabees chapter 4 is more important because it narrates the events behind the holiday of Hanukkah. And, these include things like the recapture and repurification of the temple, the reestablishment of the altar, and basically reinaugurating proper worship in the temple. These events in Jewish history were significant enough that they even added a new holiday to their calendar. And in the Judaism of this time, the calendar was incredibly important, and it wasn't something that you altered without serious consideration first.
Among classical resources are Jonathan Goldstein's 1 Maccabees in the Anchor Bible Commentary series, which provides an extensive introduction. And for the outline of the book, John Bartlett's small book, 1 Maccabees, is helpful with the comparison to Niels Mattolar's Capture and Liberation and David Williams' The Structure of 1 Maccabees. Historical and cultural studies were performed in Honigman's Tales of High Priest and Taxes, Gabriela Signori's Dying for the Faith, Killing for the Faith, and Bar Kokhba's Judas Maccabeus. And we can find some collections of studies on First Maccabees in Zengler's and Sarabit's The Books of the Maccabees. And there are many other resources as well.